Thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about the new UK global tariff, as it's being called. Well, just to recap, a tariff is, of course, a list of numbers which represent individual products. So every product, component, or ingredient has a number in the tariff. That's true today. But the tariff that we're using today is the EU-wide tariff, which is known as the CEN, the Central External Tariff of the EU. And that's the one that would be used today for any goods that are exported or imported into the UK or into the rest of Europe, come to that, because we are sharing their tariff, and we will continue to share their tariff until the 31st of December 2020, this year. After that, this new UK global tariff will, for the UK, replace the EU tariff. Now, the new UK tariff is still a list of numbers, and at the moment, that is actually all it is. What has been published is a list of numbers with products, but none of the usual explanations, chapter notes, section notes, or anything else. That is yet to come. However, it's not likely that those will be terribly different to the ones we have today, because those ones are based on the WTO, the World Trade Organization rules, and they're not changing. And we're remaining members of the World Trade Organization, so we'll still use WTO rules, and that spreads as far as the tariff. There may be a few tweaks, we'll have to wait and see, but in general, those chapter notes and section notes ought to be very similar to the ones we're used to. That being said, the new UK global tariff is not as we are used to. Not at all. It has been fundamentally changed. And this means that from the 1st of January next year, and watch out any of you who have consignments moving overnight between the 31st of December and the 1st of January, because the new tariff applies from a minute after midnight on the 31st of December. So you need to be aware of which your shipment needs to have when it crosses that time boundary at the end of the year. Now, the new UK tariff has been simplified, rationalised, and made UK-centric, because the European one is European-centric, which means it's designed to favour or protect industries in Europe, which aren't necessarily all the ones in the UK that we would like to protect. Well, the new UK tariff is UK-centric, protecting and enhancing and helping, according to the government anyway, UK industries and importers and exporters. So just to clear one thing up, exporters will need the new UK tariff because every item exported has to declare a tariff number on export, and they will be new. And every import has to declare a tariff number on import and a duty rate to go with that tariff number, and they will be new. So it is now certain that we are joining the club of the rest of the world who have different tariff numbers to each other. We will now have different tariff numbers for the same product to the EU. We will not share our tariff numbers anymore. And this is important for your systems, for your paperwork. However you record your records, the numbers will be different. Now, the new numbers have been written to protect trade, to enhance trade, or to help other people who need to have goods crossing borders. So the idea here is that this has been simplified. And the UK proudly announced that even in one section, if you like, of the tariff, that dealing with biscuits and confectionery and cakes and that sort of thing, they've knocked out 13,000 tariff numbers. They've removed 13,000 tariff numbers from that area of the tariff alone to what we have been used to. This is the simplification they mean. Now one number will cover many things, whereas before there were multiple numbers. So we are definitely simplifying the UK tariff. We've also got to remember that this tariff doesn't just change the numbers of the codes for each commodity, it also changes the import duty rates significantly. So this is something else to investigate in each of your own areas, whatever product areas you have, to see what's happened or will be happening from the 1st of January to duty rates for your imports. It will not affect the duty rates for import into the EU. But unless we have a free trade agreement with the EU of some kind, you will pay the EU tariff rates into the EU from the 1st of January, but still according to EU tariff numbers. Just as now you might have to have a UK tariff number for export and let's say an Australian tariff number for import into Australia, you will now have to have a UK global tariff number for export from the UK and an EU tariff number for import into the EU, which will determine the amount of duty to be paid in the EU. When goods leave the EU, they're going to have an EU tariff number to leave the EU as an export and an UK global tariff number to come into the UK, and the duty percentage paid into the UK will be according to the UK global tariff. Just to make sure you understand how this is coming into play. So we're changing the numbers and we're changing the import duty rates. Now, there's only 3 exceptions to that with duty rates, which is when we might have or choose to have, and again, this is not yet published, a tariff suspension, meaning there should be a tariff rate, let's say 5% into the UK, but for some reason the UK government has decided for a period of time to waive that rate and either reduce it or bring it to 0. So we have 1 or 2 of those in the new UK global tariff at the moment, but we're not completely sure that will be the entire set, but you can certainly look at some of them. We also will have an exception for GSP. You may have heard of GSP, the Generalised System of Preferences. This is for developing countries. When they export to the EU currently, they get reduced or 0 tariffs. Or when we use our own UK global tariff, we designate who are the countries in the GSP scheme, because we are keeping a GSP scheme, and we designate how much of a discount those countries will be getting into the UK. So it might show a tariff rate in the UK global tariff, but because the sending country is part of the GSP scheme, and those countries have been published for the UK for the 1st of January, then they might get 0. And then there might be a trade agreement between the UK and another country. We're negotiating quite a few around the world now, and we're attempting to negotiate one with the EU. If that is true, if there is a free trade agreement, that too will affect tariff rates, duty rates. It won't affect the tariff numbers, but the tariff rates of duty, and they would, for some products, be reduced or perhaps even 0. But we don't have one with the EU, and we're not there yet with anybody else, as far as I know. So we're not sure which products will be affected by those free trade agreements. But we hope to have lots signed by 1st of January. So hopefully quite a lot of goods will be affected. But each free trade agreement will have a different list of commodities that are affected. It's not a blanket list for anybody. The other thing that published UK tariff does not show at the moment is anything to do with countervailing or anti-dumping or safeguarding measures. Now, you might recall that those are additional duties applied as a sort of penalty to companies or governments who are undercutting the market, in essence. So those exist today, but they're Europe-wide, selected by Europe for the benefit of the whole of Europe. Well, we will be introducing ones that are selected for the UK and the benefit of the UK. So from the 1st of January, we can expect different countervailing, anti-dumping and safeguarding duty penalties than EU has. They will be changing because we're looking after UK business, not EU-centric anymore. So if your product is currently subject to any of those additional penalty duties, it may not be in the new tariff, but we haven't had that list published as yet. We still await that list, but they will be different. So we've got to all the time think about differences. So aside from deleting huge swathes of numbers, what else has the government done? Well, it's taken 3 steps. One is called simplification, And this is where a tariff might have been 4.7% in the existing EU tariff. And the UK would, if they want to keep that, will have not made it 4.7 anymore. It will be 4%. We're not going to have these point something tariffs. That's simplification. We're bringing it down to a round number. They will also have liberalised a lot of tariffs, and I mean a lot. They expect over 60% of UK imports to be liberalised, which means to have a zero rate of import duty. So they've taken huge swathes of the tariff and put zero rates against it. Things that had rates before no longer have. Video cameras, high rate of duty, zero from January. This might affect your procurement decisions. So you might need some time. You've got 6 months to sort that one out. So you benefit from the lower rate of duty. You might want to delay some purchases. Then we have the reduced rates where they've been lowered. So they still are duty rates, but they have just been lowered to what we're used to in the EU external tariff. There's one other thing, well, two other things they've done, and one is turned everything to sterling, because at the moment a lot of tariff rates, where they're expressed not as percentages but as an amounts, are in euros. Well, in the UK tariff, unsurprisingly, they're all in sterling. So that's perhaps simplified things for people. And the other thing they're going to do when there is a sterling rate of to be paid rather than the percentage is they're not messing about. If it's under £10, they're going to round it down to the nearest 10p if there has to be pence expressed. If it's over £10, it's going to be the nearest pound. Again, a simplification. And the other thing they've done is got rid of what they're calling nuisance tariffs. And in the UK speak, a nuisance tariff is anything that was currently listed as 2% or lower. Well, you'll be pleased to know if it was 2% or lower in the EU tariff, in the UK global tariff, it's now zero. They consider that just a simple nuisance and not worth collecting. So they brought it down to zero. So all round, we have a huge reduction in tariff numbers and a huge reduction in duty rates, which is probably to be applauded. Does this mean that we've now simplified the process of gaining a tariff number? Unfortunately not. Now, they have published a news article about the new tariff, and it mentions some things consumers might like. For example, Christmas trees are now to have a reduced import duty. So I can imagine everybody out there's thinking, goodness, new Christmas trees will be cheaper this year. Well, they're wrong on two counts. One, this tariff doesn't kick in until the 1st of January, too late for Christmas 2020. And two, what's a Christmas tree? We need to define the product. And is a Christmas tree a certain height? What if it's a real Christmas tree versus a plastic one? Well, it's growing, it's in a pot, as opposed to having just been cut off. Are these all the same tariff number? Is this the simplification they're talking about? No, it's not. They're not all the same tariff number. Fresh Christmas trees have certainly been reduced in duty, and that is what the headline's all about, although it just says Christmas trees. Plastic ones haven't changed. And then you've got to worry about, is my Christmas tree one you can get from my local garden centre? If you visit Santa, they give away a little sort of 30 centimetre high Christmas tree in a pot that's growing. And that's the prize or the present for the child who's seen Santa. Is that a Christmas tree? It's given for Christmas. No. Then you've got to worry about, is that rooted, bare rooted, in a pot? Has it got a root ball? Do you see what I mean? It's not that easy. You've still got to use the general interpretive rules put out by the WTO as interpreted by the UK. And we are giving our own interpretation now. That will only increase next year in order to determine whether what you choose to import is actually a Christmas tree. And if it is with the tariff codes for Christmas trees, should you be using? And this is true for every product. So no, in that respect, we haven't made tariff classification any simpler, but we have reduced the tariff numbers that you can choose from, which may be helpful. But this means you're going to have to hold an extra set of numbers and an extra set of duty rates in all of your systems. So that's still going to be possibly a problem or a facilitation, depending on how you work with the new codes and decide how they help you in your particular industry, or how they don't help you if all of a sudden there's going to be an influx of cheap imports because they've reduced the tariff duty rate to 0, and that's not going to help your industry at all. Perhaps you should have shouted louder in the consultation phase if that turns out to be the case, but bad luck if it is. So we've got lots and lots of changes. We still have to think about the GIRs and tariff classification. But how about this for an added angle of confusion, perhaps? We've recently had a paper published on Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and the new UK global tariff will apply to Northern Ireland. Between the UK and Northern Ireland, between GB and Northern Ireland, there will be no tariffs. So if you choose to ship something from London to Belfast, there will be no tariff and import into Northern Ireland because it's still within the United Kingdom. It's the same as going from London to Birmingham. There's no tariff, no duty. However, Northern Ireland is slightly different as it has a land boundary with Europe via Ireland. So there, Northern Ireland is going to have a bit of a split personality, according to the latest paper from the government. If we import to Northern Ireland and the goods are staying in Northern Ireland, and somehow the importer can be trusted that that statement will be true, that's something else we've got to discuss. That might be AEO, we don't know, but they've got to be trusted. So if the goods are staying in Northern Ireland, we use the UK global tariff numbers, but there are no customs entries and no import duty. If the goods are expected to transit Northern Ireland or undergo some process in Northern Ireland and then be moved to Ireland across the land border, then when they enter Northern Ireland, they're going to have the tariff code at import, that is the EU tariff code, and they're going to have to pay the EU rate of duty. If the goods subsequently don't go to Ireland or anywhere else in the EU directly from Northern Ireland, then there will be a rebate system. So if you think about this, you're now going to not just have to carry 2 tariffs for your products. If you trade with Northern Ireland, you're going to have to start thinking about which of the 2 applies to the shipment you're doing today, and make sure you get the right one for the circumstances described. And this is so there isn't any infrastructure on the land boundary, as has been promised in the agreements. So Northern Ireland's going to become a little bit tricky with a split personality, but all of us using Northern Ireland and working with Northern Ireland are going to have to think about that. It's also going to apply for goods coming the other way. If your goods are transiting Ireland going via Northern Ireland or into Northern Ireland, if they're transiting and coming through, and maybe coming through to the UK, to London or Birmingham or Liverpool, then which tariff do you apply and where do you apply it? Because duty is payable because those goods are in duty suspense coming through the EU. And you need to pay import duty into the United Kingdom if they're staying in the United Kingdom. So again, we're going to have to use a different tariff when we bring those goods through into the UK than it had when it was in the EU. Something else we need to think about. Think of the paperwork, the systems and the processes that will go with that, and your financial calculations for your pricing, because the rates are going to be different. At that point, I'm going to throw this open to questions, if anyone has any questions at the moment.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself by clicking on the little picture of the microphone, and feel free to ask your question now. Would anybody like to ask a question? No questions at all.
Goodness, I've stunned everyone into silence. Okay, so the whole point of the UK global tariff is to simplify things. That's what the press releases are saying. But I think you can see that whilst it certainly does simplify some elements and it reduces cost for some things, it may be going to increase your internal costs as you ramp your systems up to deal with 2 tariffs where you only had 1 previously. It may also mean you need 2 classification numbers, and your pricing may need to change to give you 2 sets of pricing depending on how it's moving through Europe or not, because that will change for us significantly. So we've got to look at each individual tariff code to see what the government has actually done, whether it's done the simplification or the anything else that it's done. I mean, for example, bicycles. We still need to know if they have ball bearings or not. That's still required. But what they've done there is absolutely no change. The tariff is 14% today, and it's going to be 14% from the 1st of January. So that one is completely unchanged, although anti-dumping may well change on bicycles when we get that notification, because we do have anti-dumping currently on bicycles. What about fresh tangerines? There's another one, left field there. They're 12.8% today in the EU tariff, and will remain so if you want to import them into the other 27 member states. But from the 1st of January here, we've done away with those silly points. So here it's going to be 12%, not 12.8. So a slight reduction, but not a mega reduction. But for other products, I'm going to pick another one, an essential oil of lemons, 7% becomes 0. So you can see that across the board they've done this. They've done it to video cameras. There's changes to monitors for computers. Christmas trees come to mind, because they've gone to 0 only if they are real and not planted, mind you, but they've gone to 0. So there's a great many things that have changed one way or the other, and you need to prepare your business for that change, and I suggest 6 months is just about enough time, not something to sit on your hands for. You need to actually make those alterations and start making those alterations today. Take a look at the new GSP lists, see the countries that are on it. There's not a lot of change. They will be getting 0 duty rates for the most part, but according to the new tariff codes from the 1st of January. And then we await further information on origin discounts and further information on anti-dumping, which should come out shortly, we hope, in the next few weeks to help you with your determination. But now's the time to start looking at this new tariff and to start communicating amongst your business how this is going to make differences for you in the future. Because your business needs to know too. I'm sure sales, marketing, and purchasing are equally interested, along with supply chain and trade compliance. And don't forget trade compliance, because we'll be looking for one code on audit until midnight on the 31st of December, and then another code after that. Now, be careful here, because I said midnight on the 31st of December. That's according to UK time. But is it going to be midnight for us? Because we're swapping back, aren't we? We're going back to Greenwich Mean Time by then, because the summertime will be over. Europe is also an hour different to us. So actually, for the UK, this change won't happen at midnight. It'll happen at 11:01, because that's midnight plus a minute in Europe. So we've got to remember the time difference too, when this new tariff will come in. So if we just want to finish, if there's any other questions or any other thoughts, I'll pass you back to Claire.
Does anybody have any other questions? If not, I will summarise and wrap up for you. No questions? Well, thank you everybody for attending this afternoon. Do join us for some of our other webinars. They are all listed and available on our website. You can register for those still to come and view those we've already had. We're getting the videos up as soon as we can. I'd like just to remind everybody, if you do need more help, more training for any of the topics we discuss in our webinars or anything to do with customs, and AEO. There is still the UK government grant scheme, which will give you grants of up to £2,250 per person per course. That's not per person in total, that's per course. And this will pay course fees. All of our customs, international trade and AEO training courses are eligible for that. So please do go and take advantage of that if you're a UK company. You can find the details at www.customsintermediarygrant, all one word, .co.uk. This is being run by PwC on behalf of HMRC, and these are grants. They are not loans. You do not have to pay them back, but you pay for the course once you've got your approval, and then you will be able to claim the money back after you've paid for the course. So do go and take advantage of that. Now,